Fly Me Out, a new invitation-only social travel club app where hot chicks can sign up for trips with rich guys. Go ahead, read between the lines. Recently launched, sparking negative reactions on social media. While concerns about trafficking are understandable, the anti-prostitution outrage feels a little precious. Are we really pretending guys haven't been using Instagram for precisely this purpose for years? Hordash just makes it a little more explicit, which is, by the way, why the app will probably fail, so relax. If we're clutching pearls, let's talk about the CCP using TikTok to keep a database of our fingerprints, or incels permanently connecting to their VR headsets, auto blow 3000 combo while the birth rate plummets. Uber Meets is at least improving the fuck rate, said Riley Nork for Pirate Wire's 3 Mornings takes this morning.
Yeah, I worked with him on that one. It started from a tweet of mine, so I feel confident talking about this subject. I didn't know we were talking about this today, but I am happy to talk about this today. Where do we begin with that?
You tell me, dude. This is your story.
Well, first of all, you guys should subscribe to the Pirate Wires Daily and get our 3 takes.
Yes, you should. I read it every morning.
Thank you very much. I think that so you have this app. It's not actually called the Hordash. It's called. You said it. It's right. It's Fly Me Out. So I mean, you have this app that is designed to connect young, hot women with rich, probably not so hot guys on yachts and whatnot, and people freak out because why? It's the explicit, this is a transactional thing of it all. But I started noticing, I mean, years ago on Instagram, people with like 10,000, 20,000 followers on Instagram, all like clockwork. You hit that number, maybe two times that number, and suddenly for some reason you want to go to Dubai.
A lot of time in the Middle East.
It's you see these pictures. I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to this other random oil-rich country where there's like lots of oil royalty, and I'm flying first class somehow. How are you doing that with 20,000 Instagram followers? It doesn't pay you any money.
No job. No obvious sign of employment.
This is how the world works. Instagram is like a yellow pages for hot people who are for sale. I don't think all of them are like this. I don't want to say that's true of everybody, but I mean, you slide into someone's DMs and you offer them a yacht. Like that is sort of how the world works online. And it's maybe how it's always worked for young hot people. I don't know. Hollywood seems like that kind of a vibe in general, but I think that what people freaked out about here is the explicit nature of it. It's by saying it out loud, by making it more obvious. People don't like that. Everyone's sort of, I can't believe that people are so stupid as they don't know this is happening, but if they are, okay, fine, different class of person. I think the average person sort of sees those Dubai trips and is like, what's going on there? But then they don't think too much about it because there's this polite lie we tell about it. Anyway, internet's fun. That one made me fun.
Why is calling it out? Why is being explicit about something that most people probably had an idea was happening? Why is that causing uproar?
I don't know. I mean, this is always the case of everything, right? Isn't this just what the nature of being polite is? It's this, we tell each other these polite lies in social situations to make everybody feel comfortable. And I don't know, there are whole like novels written about this. Jane Austen has been writing. Maybe she writes about this better than anybody else at all. Just talking about sort of the rules of polite society and what exists behind those rules. It will always exist. This is just something that happens to be really contentious in our culture. I also think there's something happening, separate from all that. If you're super online, you've probably noticed there's this rising trad right-wing thing, which is super it's maybe like classically socially conservative. And I think we just haven't seen that kind of a real forceful conservative, socially conservative right-wing thing in a while, at least since I was in college. I think it's definitely more popular now than ever. I don't know how popular it is outside of the internet. We'll find out probably soon.
It's like a meme movement purpose built to counteract other meme movements that kind of only really exist on the internet.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's like, the internet is a world of like based Greek statues fighting sort of genderqueer they, them anime fairies. And they both come with their own philosophies. And I mean, I've taken this stuff very seriously for a very long time, and I think that I'm at least a little bit right about that. The question is, how right am I about that? It seems like those things, those groups of people, and this ideological warfare that's sort of visualized online in that way does have an impact on politics. So it's a little bit downstream of that, at least. So you see that I think a lot with the almost meme-like framing of DeSantis as he signed the anti-lab-grown meat bill. It felt very trad right-wing Twitter adjacent, even though there's all sorts of real obvious sort of boring political reasons for that, including just the money that lobbyists spend on campaigns, especially in Florida, and how much impact agriculture has on US politics.
Can you explain what that framing was for the people who aren't sufficiently
You
turned
have like
online?
these hot people. You have just huge jack dudes and gorgeous bombshell blondes, like fitness influencer looking people, before a table of real meat splayed out at the butcher, and DeSantis like signing this bill. Or he might have been, I think he was inspecting the meat as he announced the signing of the anti-lab grown meat bill in Florida. So I know you can't work on it there. I think you can't buy it either. I'm not sure if you can bring it there. You definitely, it's the most aggressive anti-lab grown meat bill that exists, which has a lot to do with the fact that you just can't get it yet. It's a sort of abstract conversation we're having. But he couched it in memes, in mimetic. I don't want to call it language because but it's visual language. It's like mimetic visual language is how he got that point across. Or maybe how he tried to get support for what he was doing. But this stuff does, long story short, this stuff, what happens on the internet, does matter at least a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there was that Dark Brandon moment, right, where they tried to get Biden to meme. And the reason that I thought that was, to be honest, actually pretty funny.
Dark Brandon's a good meme. It's like a shockingly good meme.
It's a really fucking, it's the Uno reverse card of the left. I think the problem was that it's kind of a little bit like hearing your mum do a gay joke.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the background is like,
this.
That Biden has never actually seen the meme. And if he has, he doesn't understand it. Like, he's not the one memeing. He can't even string a sentence together. I don't even know that he's been online in probably years. I mean, does he check his email? I don't know how it works for him, but he has handlers who know at least a little bit about memes. So they were able to sort of get that one out there. Whereas Trump, I mean, when you're up against someone like Trump understands memes. Trump's online. That Trump is tweeting himself. No one was tweeting for him. He understands the internet. He understands crowds. And so any sort of mimetic war with him is going to be hard to win. He's very good. He's the god troll of the internet.
The heavyweight champion of meme war. How do you sort of conceptualize the broad armies of sort of discussion and pockets of mimetic warfare on the internet now? And like, where do you fall within this? Like, what are you as well as a part of this?
Man, it's so complicated now. And I'm having a hard time recently. Not a hard time. I think I'm in a process now of recalibrating my sense of what's going on, because the internet has changed so quickly over the last year and a half, 2 years.
Take me through that. Explain to me how you sort of conceptualize this last sort of...
Well, the vibe shift has been coming for a while, and I've written about it. I wrote about it, I think, gosh, it might have been like a year and a half, 2 years ago. We've been on this train for quite a bit. It was post-COVID. A lot of the lies we were forced to believe, or at least parrot online, became so incredible that the whole order that was sort of propping them up, when we're talking about lies about COVID, lies about gender, lies about, honestly, I think, and this one's going to be more controversial, but I look at something like January 6th and it's like, that wasn't a coup. So what are we actually talking about here? Like, no one really believes it was a coup. Not even the New York Times believe. They won't use that word coup. Who's using the word coup? Not them, for a reason, because it's like, if whatever that narrative was that was constructed of all of these different things became impossible to defend. And at that point, once it became impossible to defend, you started seeing a lot of dissent across the board in all sorts of different places where I agree, places where I don't. But it was sort of a mass disagreement. In fact, disagreeing with that consensus became popular and has rewards associated with it on social media. Okay, there are way more influencers who are opposed to this stuff now who are doing well than there are people who are for the whatever the state narrative is. That feels like it's just over. You have the
And that's
remnant.
on both sides of the fence, as opposed to previously, you would have basically had someone who would have been cynical or disagreed if it was
I
against
mean,
their particular perspective, but now more people on both sides. Is that your belief?
just a few years ago, you had a mainstream sort of state narrative about everything in your life. And that was defended ferociously by a handful, not a handful, a sort of army of media, both institutions and influencers who worked for those institutions, who were artificially amplified by social media platforms. Their voices were actually artificially put on blast. They both disseminated a story that was the correct story, and they ruthlessly attacked anybody who stepped outside of it. And so it was a very dark time to be someone who had weird ideas. It was like no real way to do it without getting sort of massive, massive blowback, probably losing your job if you didn't work for Peter Thiel like I did. It was not good. The story became so absolutely clownish and so unpopular that it began to fall apart. And that's around the time that Elon bought Twitter. And so everything there was no more political censorship. All of the artificial amplification ended. The Overton window of acceptable speech completely broadened. And once that happened, the old world of the influencers who maintain the narrative, and then all of the people just below them who would sort of wink at the truth, try and edge around the truth, try and meme in interesting ways. That was a pressure that really, I think, forced creativity among dissenters. All of that ended. And so now what you have are people really just being honest and saying sort of a range of things that are either interesting or crazy. And I don't know that it tracks so easily to groups anymore. There used to be sort of the wokes and the antis, the people who sort of oppose the woke framework and the woke orthodoxy and this culture of silence. I no longer believe that culture of silence exists in the way that it did. I think it still exists to some extent. This infection of institutions still exists. You still have different universities and things where you're forced to sort of speak to DEI mandates and things like these sort of affirmative. You're expected to affirm the orthodoxy of these regressive racial sort of quotas and things like this. But who has been attacked for criticizing that lately? Like, really try and think about that. It's nothing but awards. And that says to me that culture is changing rapidly. And then in terms of the camps now, I think it's really not clear. I think it's easy to, and I think a lot of people on the right especially really want to believe that old machine still exists because it was such a fun fight because it was like a righteous
the
fight.
anti-woke thing.
Yeah, it was a righteous fight. You were fighting what felt and what really constituted power, and a really unjust abuse of power over speech. I just don't think that's there anymore. And so people are having to do the uncomfortable thing of ask themselves, what do I actually believe and what do I want? And there's way more disagreement on those questions than there was agreement on the question of whether or not the woke thing was good, and it wasn't. So
Isn't it
confusion now? I said,
isn't it interesting, this, like, the allure of being a righteous revolutionary speaking truth to power? There's so much nobility associated with that. You're just draped in glory.
Yeah.
If you push back against something that and most people kind of do, and that the people that are pushing it also kind of don't believe in it, and it's sort of low key on the side by the water cooler, everyone kind of has your back a little bit. It has all of the appearance of being a brave, flame wielding martyr with none of the real risk, especially if you're like a fun employed fucking like degenerate self-employed writer type person. And now that hegemony isn't perceived in the same way, you're like, what am I fighting against? I wonder whether downstream from this, places like maybe The Blaze or Daily Wire or whatever, I wonder how they're positionally gonna sort of maneuver themselves.
I think it's
around
bad news for them. The Daily Wire was the first place that I noticed this. I was watching these endless Matt Walsh and Candace Owens clips where, and this was a while, like a year and a half ago or something, maybe 2 years ago. There, it was just every day. It was another woke whack-a-mole story where they find some idiot online saying something that was crazy, and they looked crazy. They were saying crazy things. They wanted something crazy, but they just didn't really matter. It didn't feel like that mattered anymore because culture had already changed so much. And I thought, man, what are they doing here? And I realized, they have to do this. This is what their audience wants. This is the audience they built. It's all their audience knows. It's the thing that the audience expects from them, and is the only thing the audience will tolerate from them, because they haven't actually at that institution shared a really coherent sense of what they wanted, because many of them disagreed, as we now see with the exit of Candace, right? There's strong disagreement over there about what they actually are. Again, agreement on what they don't like, but what are they? What is the America that they want? That's not clear. And those places are going to have a really hard time, I think, turning that ship into a new direction. And this seems to be a problem the right wing has had in politics for a really long time, because it's almost designed to be losing. It's like, oh, it's been losing our whole life. It's lost.
How do you mean?
I mean, the country has just shifted left every year a little bit more and more, and the left has sort of swallowed culture, every cultural institution. And so when you have these media upstarts that have a different voice, it's automatically a reaction against mainstream culture and politics.
Your existence is only ever positioned in opposition to whatever that orthodoxy hegemon is,
which is necessary. But then once you and the few dissidents left sort of running their mouths win in any way whatsoever, and like right now, I would classify this as, I wouldn't say it's a victory, but there have been a series of great victory, like small victories against cultural hegemony. So you have this space where someone probably could forward an interesting, compelling counter idea, not just a critique of the power structure, but an alternative, and people are listening. But the sort of critics don't know what that is. I think a lot of them have never even talked about it.
A lot of defense being played, permanent defense.
It's also a lot of people who've maybe never even thought of these things. Probably most people have never thought of these things who are popular online. These are influencers who have chased an algorithm for years. They got a lot of attention for a certain kind of thing, and they're still doing it. I used to think about the Dylan Mulvaney stuff a lot, which was crazy. I mean, I wrote about this when the Budweiser thing happened and the repercussions of that. It was very interesting. But is Dylan Mulvaney like really a threat? Like, are we still talking about Dylan Mulvaney? Like, how long did that have to happen? It's like you do it because that is what's being rewarded online for this kind of person.
It's incentives all the way down. I had this idea that this kind of relates to. I want to teach you about it. So I came up with this idea called the Culture Wars Shiny Object Cycle, and it's a 6-stage process that pretty much every news story goes through, I think. So number 1, some woke news story hits the press. Cats suffer from racial discrimination, or screwing in light bulbs needs to be recognized as a valid sexual kink or something. Number 2, the right-wing antibody response activates. Look at how insane these people are. Matt Walsh quote tweets the article and calls it obnoxious. This is the problem with our convenient, decadent TikTok society. Number 3, this reaction causes the story to gain infinitely more traction than it ever would have done by signal boosting the original Fringe scenario into a much bigger event. Number 4, the left-wing counter-response activates. Right-wingers lose their minds over one woman with a particularly dark cat. The Daily Wire has a meltdown over an insignificant troll article. In times where the original story is less insane, this includes a defense of the original article too. Cats actually can experience trauma. Minimizing this is the real problem. Number 5, the right-wing re-reaction kicks into gear. Apparently, I'm insane for pushing back against cat trauma. See, this is the problem. If we don't stand our ground, these blue-haired idiots will take over the country. And number 6, finally, the touch grass meta-reactionaries steam in. The real issue is people talking about this issue. Look at how silly this whole thing is. It's time to check out of the culture war. We should reconnect with what really matters. You should move on to the ranch next to Ryan Holiday and hammer fence posts into the ground for the rest of time.
Yeah, I mean, they're all like, that is true and funny.
And
but I
I've
would,
also been each one of those 6, by the way. Like I've
well, and
appeared
I would
at
also say there's a reason. I think the original cat story does actually matter. It's written for a reason, right? This is a person who is creating a narrative about what culture is. The reason that you have a visceral reaction against it would be your recognition that this is not just one-off thing. It represents something about what our culture is. And in there, you usually are correct, right? You know, these crazy gender stories we saw for years have resulted in a skyrocketing number of young kids who think that they're a different gender. And what does that mean for our society? It's clearly not. You know what, this is a whole, that'll take us, we could talk about gender for a long time. I don't want to necessarily get in the weeds on that. I just do think that the stories we consume have an impact on how
I don't
society is
disagree. So
shaped.
the reason that I called it the shiny object cycle is that what I was particularly interested in is why, given the fact that it pretty reliably follows the same 6 steps each time, why do we continue to be captured by stories that are formulaic and a layout that's formulaic? And it's because my belief is that each time that the story comes along, it's just sprinkled with sufficient novelty to make it seem to us like it's something new. That was the shiny part of it. For instance, it's LGBT month in soon, and
Here it comes.
there will I know there will be some addition to the flag. There will be something that's added on. It's people with a gluten intolerance or hearing deficiency or Crohn's disease or something. And that will be, well, we haven't seen this flag before.
Yeah.
And it legitimates the pushback because people think, well, this is new. This is more ground is being seceded to the crazy woke idiots.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just the sense that it's the amount of, it's hard because I wasn't around before the internet, right? So I don't know how I remember. I mean, I was around, I was alive, but I don't really remember how the media cycles shaped and how long they would last. And ours today are rapid, and anyone can get involved. So people with relatively little power, maybe no attention or friends, no matter what their politics are, left or right, feel empowered to say crazy shit and get attention online for that crazy shit. And I wonder often how much of this is driven really by that. Just people who want someone to see them. And so they're actually saying this really crazy shit for that reason.
People who just
And
needed more hugs when they were a kid.
I mean, everyone needs hugs, and
I'm pro hug.
and
I think that's
and
something that we can all get on board with. More hugs.
yeah, Elon should offer that instead of, I don't know, cash checks for shit posting.
Mm.
Like we'll give you some physical attention, some love. But
Well, that's
when someone
something
is
else,
sufficiently
dude.
starved,
The fucking shit posting thing, like not, Poe's law has become so Poe-y. I have no idea. At least 50% of the things that I read on Twitter, I'm like, I have no idea if this is meant to be an earnest post or if I should just disregard it.
yeah, all of the anonymous people feel like this to me, where it's not really clear what they believe, and or if it's just like sort of wild performance art. And then
Interpretive
also,
dance of Twitter.
yeah, the other thing when you're dealing with anonymous people, it's like, are they even adults? How many teenagers am I fighting with online? I never know the answer to that question, but it would answer a lot of other questions I have about the quality of thinking.
Okay, so we've got this sort of odd transition where the more mental, progressive, woke, orthodoxy type thing has maybe been pushed back against in quite an effective way over the last 2 years or something. What do you think? How good's your crystal ball for where you think the main tribes are going to be and moving forward, and what the main narratives are going to be over the next 18 months?
Well, right now, everything is feeling really fractured by platform. So there's been an interesting migration. I just accidentally logged into Threads this morning and saw a cut on a drama that I did not even follow very closely at all, which was this football player who I think at a commencement speech suggested that women should be homemakers.
The stay-at-home thing, and then one of the Kelseys got in trouble. Jason Kelsey got in trouble.
Both Kelseys got involved, and then one got very aggressive and was like, I would never advise my daughter to be a homemaker. And this is, I feel bad talking about this one because I haven't dipped into it, so I might be getting some of these facts wrong. Don't hold it against me. But my point is not really about the story so much as like I knew almost nothing about it until I went onto Threads and saw a lot of support for very left-wing type arguments of a kind that I used to see much more on Twitter and have become sort of insulated from to a certain extent.
Wow. Okay.
And
so you've got now viewpoints segmented by platform.
yeah, and now I saw stuff about this on Twitter or X. Like I saw the backlash to the backlash. Whoopi Goldberg defends, but it was never so big enough to care about that you were like, oh, I better figure out what this drama is. It didn't penetrate to that extent on X. It's much bigger elsewhere, and that's because it's a bigger deal to the left, I think. And I think that you will see this just total fragmentation of media, not just, I'm a Daily Wire reader or a New York Times reader, but where do you go to talk about those stories? It's already been a trend. Jack Dorsey talked a little bit about this in an interview I did with him for Pirate Wires.
What do you learn from him? You got to sit down with the ex Twitter man as now you are one of the current sort of big Twitter men. Like what did you learn?
So much. I think the big thing about Jack Dorsey is he's really just the most misunderstood leader in tech, I think. Jack created something that became explosive and was a piece of a much bigger explosion, which was social media. And is it even social media? It's more like interactive media now. This thing where any one of us can open up our smartphone that lives in our pocket, or our supercomputer lives in our pocket, and tweet our opinion out to millions of people. What does that mean for society, right? And he was at the front lines of that, and he's a free speech guy, more so than any of the other leaders up until recently. He's a sort of crypto-y, anarcho-capitalist-y type guy who tried his best to maximize freedom for as long as he could, and then faced a lot of just impossible to overcome obstacles with a publicly traded company. The biggest one would have been advertising. So you have these huge advertising giants that will turn you off overnight, and that could happen to him. And if that happened to him, and in fact, previously they'd been threatened with this, you lose your stock price plummets, and you risk a hostile takeover, which actually has been attempted on that company. And so he was forced into this pragmatic place, which he, as I think an ideological person, really hated. He tried to create a technology that would have ended the problem completely. No censorship ever would have had to have happened again if Blue Sky worked in the way that he wanted. And then that didn't quite work out either. He wasn't in charge of that one, but there's a lot there. I could talk about Jack for a while. I think the main thing is just, I actually do believe that he was facing a set of problems that no one had ever faced before. Other people, contemporaries of his, were facing them along with him. He did slightly better than all of them, I think. In terms
maybe
of,
they didn't have the value set or the ideological.
They did not. So if you're judging him as, and he often is judged as someone who is very bad for free speech, someone who is anti-free speech, someone who's pro-censorship, pro-government, he's in fact, to a certain degree, the face of that for a lot of people, especially on the right. It's not fair. He is the best on free speech of all of his contemporaries. He is the only one who I can see who is genuinely ideologically among the giants, who is genuinely ideologically motivated in favor of that stuff. He just failed in a kind of tragic way. It's the story of him is, I don't know, it's sort of touching to me, because I just see someone who really did actually try, and who, for whatever reason, couldn't. Taking the company private solves a lot of the problems that he was facing, not all of them. The company is still under a lot of pressure and facing a huge uphill climb, but it's the first step in the right direction, and it's a step that Jack himself actually helped achieve for Elon. He was a part of that. He wanted this. So
Is it the case then, as different social medias become, different platforms kind of become more and less popular with certain subsets, that you are going to have, everyone knows, like, there's probably some mad shit on Rumble's comment section and Truth Social,
Yeah.
but you still think, well, yeah, but Twitter's everyone, isn't it? And Instagram's everyone. Like, everyone's got there's a big four or whatever. Do you think that we're going to see this start to sort of splinter off more so? And that means that you're going to get a skewed perspective. Right wingers are going to see, the world's going to see more right wing, and progressive people, the world's going to see more progressive, because that's just their
Twitter's always
sphere.
been pretty niche to begin with, even before the Elon takeover. It was a small social media platform compared to the other. And in terms of advertising revenue, it was small compared to other tech giants. So one, Facebook, which is the more natural comparison, but then also Google. And those two companies swallow up all of the advertising revenue. So Twitter's always competing for very, very like scraps, basically. But in terms of the audience, and in terms of the audience, this is related. The audience on Twitter was very small. It was the small percentage of people in the country who are super motivated by ideas, affected by ideas, and want to share them and think a lot. Writing, it's like, I think language is just writers versus picture people is what you get on Instagram or TikTok, even to a certain extent, which is more like a storytelling. Those feel more primal, and Twitter feels more, well, it's literary, and it's like literary warfare, and that is not everybody in the country. So it was always small, and now I would say it's increasingly smaller, because the left, unlike the right, is at this moment in time culturally highly motivated by censorship and wanting to insulate itself from other views and opinions. They believe, I think, that the opinions are beyond the pale and need to be iced out. I think they're probably really scared of them because they don't have counter arguments, which is what is motivating the entire thing. I think probably there are a lot of left wing people who hear certain arguments, probably on immigration and things like this, that they clock as beyond the pale and don't want to face, because on some level they recognize that they're important arguments and they don't have an answer to them, and that makes them uncomfortable. But beyond the psychoanalysis, the facts are just that left-wing people don't want to be in a place where right-wing people are permitted to speak. And so at least the very sort of hardcore left-wing people. So they have almost all left. You have a lot of media people who still stay on X, but the real committed ideological type people.
Where are they?
There are a handful. Threads more and more, but you can't really talk about politics there. I think that's the biggest competitor right now, or it's certainly the biggest competitor. But then you have a spectrum of things. You have Blue Sky, you have Mastodon, and you have an endless number of group chats that I think are popping up and proliferating.
Telegram and shit like that.
On those things. Then also, what is it? Discord. There are any number of other places where people are pooling, and I think the future will be some sort of more fragmented media platform situation, unless something happens at X, which turns it around, which could also happen. Elon, I don't really believe is anathema to. I don't believe he's anathema to censorship. I think that he's less ideologically committed to this than even Jack was. He believes in it for America, free speech. But if laws start to change, abroad, for example, he just follows the rule of the law wherever it is, and or the letter of the law wherever it is. And in the context of America, we'll see. But the rules could change tomorrow, and once they change even a little bit, I think you see people come back.
Is it weird to be building a media company right now? Like, Vice fell apart, BuzzFeed's a mess, the NPR just hired a crazy lady to run it. Like, what the fuck's happening to Rolling Stone?
Yeah.
What do you think about this sort of future of media versus independent media and all of that?
It is a really crazy time to be building a media company. It makes no sense. I don't recommend it. I think it is stressful, and the path to victory is very narrow. You're not making revenue on clicks anymore. That style of people, like, it's clickbait. Clickbait doesn't matter. It's not what's helping anybody. That whole style of new media has died. This is why BuzzFeed is in the state that it's at right now. This is why someone like Vivek could even try a hostile takeover with that company, because it's worth nothing, because that style of media just does not make business sense. What works is subscription revenue, and people subscribe to things that help them make sense of the world and confirm their biases. So that's what's true of the New York Times, and that's true of Pirate Wires, is people who are paying money to us do so because they feel like we're on the same side, fighting for the same things. That is a much smaller pool of revenue than the massive advertising, flood of money that we saw, not only, in the early 2000s when the social thing first happened, but, decades and decades ago. So it's going to be a way smaller industry to begin with. I think that there is potentially a lot of interesting upside on co-branded products that matter to your audience and you, things that you both. So imagine you're a fitness influencer and you're doing like a chain of gyms or something. Like those kind of partnerships are going to matter more. But like what that means for investigative reporting is not good. I don't know how you do that in this new world.
This is the pen and pad that I use. This is the note-taking app that I'm obsessed
and nobody
with.
cares because nobody follows investigative reporters around for identity-based reasons, and identity-based reasons are what drive the entire contemporary media landscape. So it's difficult. Nobody has an answer to this question, and if they tell you they're wrong, my sense is fragmentation. Do what you know and love and fight for the things that you believe to be true. I believe that you should be biased and you should wear your bias on your sleeve. And then I think that you use the revenue that you make to nurture younger people who are telling a different part of your story that you think is important. And that's where I hire journalists and things like this to report out different pieces of the puzzle that I'm just not going to have time to do.
Dude, your team, some of your reporters, is it River Page?
He left.
Oh no! God damn it!
Yeah, he's gone. Sanjana is still there though.
Okay, cool.
And we're hiring.
Anyway, you've got some good people. You mentioned American colleges earlier on. Is that the waste ground that everybody thinks that they are lost cause?
American colleges? It's crazy because they should be out of business, right? Like, I don't know, man. Like, didn't it seem like a lost cause 10 years ago? And people are still not only sending their kids to go to school, but for how much money is it a year to send your kids to like NYU or something with room and board? I think we're definitely over $60,000 a year at this point. I think we're closer pushing to 70. I think it might. You know what? I'm not going to Google it. I don't know what you guys do in post. If you have like a number you can flash, but it's a lot. It's more money than I would have ever thought people would have paid for a college degree plus room and board for 4 years, and you're not even accounting for interest.
There it is. So 58,168 tuition, 23,927 other costs, books and on-campus room and board.
That's $80,000 a year.
$82,095
for a year.
That was 21-22
for a year.
That
if that hasn't killed this, and the fact that it's very obvious now these are just sort of like woke indoctrination camps hasn't killed this, I don't know what's going to kill this. I think that every year it feels like it's the last year. I do think, if I'm not wrong, I'm pretty sure admissions were down for one of the years, but not down nearly as to where they should be. What has to happen is the government has to stop giving out loans. The government should have nothing to do with the loan system at all. You should be able to declare bankruptcy on your student loan debt, which you're presently not allowed to do.
The only one that you can't.
And what that's going to do, once you're able to discharge student loan debt easily, if with a massive hit on your credit score, and the government's not guaranteeing loans, students are going to have to go to private banks, and the private banks are going to have to run risk analysis and say, if I give you $82,000 a year times 4 plus interest, do you have any hope in hell of paying that back with a gender studies degree in your lifetime? The answer is no. And so it's a bad loan and you're not going to get it. And once the banks start making decisions, once you allow the private banks to make decisions like this, all of the prices will reset. They'll have to. Most of the second, third tier beyond.
Oh, right. Because the funding is cartelled inside of the system. No one gets to sort of peer under the skirt of what's happening.
We have this idea that is almost an inalienable right to go to college. And that is a weird cultural idea that makes no sense whatsoever. It's way worse than even healthcare, which I also don't think you have like an inalienable right to. You don't have a right to someone else's labor. That's not how like rights work. But healthcare is something that you can maybe wrap your head around. We all need healthcare.
As a British
Obviously, we need it
person,
to
that makes
survive.
sense to me. Yeah.
College is not that. You do not need college. Like, you don't need to go. You don't need it to survive. You can make an argument that it's actually really bad for a lot of people, maybe even most people who are not going to sort of upper tier schools and then just getting, well, certainly now you can make it because you're being saddled with tons of debt and you're not getting great job opportunities necessarily because of it. So because of that idea, though, that everybody's entitled to it and in fact needs it to a certain extent to succeed, you can't turn people away. And that's a system we've built where you can't turn people away from a loan, no matter how massive. And that you have to get rid of that. You have to just get the bankers back in and say, are you able to pay this back or not? Do I think? And if you are, great. And if you're not, and I give you the loan, then I suffer for it. And once bankers have to suffer for these decisions, you're not going to have a problem anymore, because they're not there. The banks have been around for a very long time. And if their existence is on the line, the loans are not going to happen. And once the loans can't happen, the colleges have to reset their prices.
Did you see there was a study done by Corey Clark that came out a little while ago? A new study sheds light on taboos in science, confirming that race and IQ are the most taboo subject of all. They condensed down a bunch of statements that were the 10 most taboo in all of psychology. Did you see this?
I didn't, but I believe it. Those are the two that I would definitely consider race and IQ to be.
I'll dictate you the top 10. So the authors began by interviewing 41 researchers in psychology to get an idea of which topics are most taboo. Using the researchers' answers as a guide, they condensed those topics into a set of 10 statements. Number 1, the tendency to engage in sexually coercive behavior likely evolved because it conferred some evolutionary advantages on men who engaged in such behavior. Number 2, gender biases are not the most important drivers of the underrepresentation of women in STEM fields. Number 3, academia discriminates against black people in hiring, promotion, grants, invitations, etc. Number 4, biological sex is binary for the vast majority of people. Number 5, the social sciences in the United States discriminate against conservatives. Number 6, racial biases are not the most important drivers of higher crime rates among black Americans relative to white Americans. Number 7, men and women have got different psychological characteristics because of evolution. Number 8, genetic differences explain non-trivial 10% or more variances in race differences and intelligence test scores. Number 9, transgender identity is sometimes the product of social influence. Number 10, demographic diversity, race and gender in the workplace often leads to worse performance. And then she went through and studied 470 psychology professors and basically found that so many professors are terrified. Like, they don't like the censorship, but they are terrified of speaking up. Like, absolutely terrified of it.
Yeah. I mean, which one of those topics do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, there's some stuff in there. Like, men and women have biological sex is binary for the vast majority of people. Like, I don't know who is disagreeing with that statement.
Yeah, well, that's an easy one at this point. I mean, you can't help but anyone who sees a high school race with, let's say, a trans woman absolutely destroying her competition is not going to be okay with that. That's 90+% of people are going to see that and say, okay, this is fucking crazy. And in a way, I sort of think that that's the issue. I really do think it's like that and the COVID sort of coercive vaccination, that combination just ended the whole prior order of thought policing.
That was the solvent that undid the adhesive.
It was just, on the COVID stuff, too vicious, and on the trans stuff, specifically the trans athlete stuff, too unbelievable, too absurd. Like that combination just dispelled the illusion of authority for a lot of people. And on the rest of them, I think probably everything you're not allowed to talk about. It doesn't mean that these sort of people who want to talk about it or write about it but you're probably, if you're not allowed to talk about it, it's a safe assumption that there's something important there that we should probably be trying to understand, but we are refusing to for whatever reason.
Did you see that a trans woman won Cannes Best Actress award for the first time?
No, but
Carla Sofia Gascon, the Spanish performer, said, "We all have the opportunity to change for the better," as she made history at the festival with her gong.
well, she certainly changed herself, didn't she? It was
Dude,
quite a change.
I don't know. Like this, one of the other things that I was particularly exhausted by over the last few years is this desire to read conspiracy and coordination and much more sophisticated malevolent intent into pretty much everything. This desire to read deeper meaning. I think the internet kind of assumes that people have a well thought out reason for everything that they do. And as far as I can tell, most people are just trying to make it through to the end of the day and not get fired and pay for shit. And yeah, sure, there's like some super smart people pulling the strings at the top, but yeah,
But not even really. I agree. I think that we want to believe they're like they are in charge more than they are, because if someone was in charge, that would be great. It would be great to believe that. You look around, I mean, it's like chaos everywhere. If you're in San Francisco, whatever city in this country you're in, it's fucked. Like, you could just break it down. There are a handful of things about it that are just seriously, unbelievably fucked, from crime to housing to just basic level sanitation, education, whatever. It's all really bad. And you want to believe that someone is in charge, because if someone's in charge, that means if you could just bully them enough or get rid of them and put someone else in charge, the problem would be fixed. But the bigger problem seems to be a combination of, I don't know, nihilism at the top among the sort of elites of our country, and then no one is actually in charge. There's not a lot of stepping up and taking control of things. And even if there was a will to do that, politically, we're structured in such a way that it's very difficult for a single person, let alone a small group of people, let alone a single person, to actually change anything. In San Francisco, for example, the homeless problem, right? It's like, what one specific person is in charge of that? Nobody. What group of people are in charge of that? It's a lot of people who have some piece of it. And if you asked any one of them, are you in charge of it? They would say no. There's no one taking responsibility for it. And I blame them, of course, they're terrible. But also part of it is a systemic problem where we're not giving anyone the authority to do it. And I think we have to do that. We have to get better at empowering people to actually change things and then punishing them for when they don't do it.
I came across this Packy McCormick quote that said, "The greatest trick the devil ever played was making you believe that the pessimists are the good guys." And this, just prevalent fucking cynicism. Dude, whether it's top down or bottom up, whether it's in a comment section or in a press release or just in the like lopey demeanor of the way that people sort of step out to give some sort of statement, it's so boring and tiring, and I wish that people were more enthusiastic about stuff.
Well, pessimists are usually right. It's a safe bet to make that something new is not going to work, and that's why people do it. When you are making a positive prediction about the future that has never existed before, it's like your odds of being wrong are very high, and your odds of predicting all of the fallout from that are infinitesimally small. There are so many. Anytime you create something, let's talk about artificial intelligence. You create, even if we just had ChatGPT, what are going to be the consequences of that long term? We have no idea. We're still dealing with the consequences long term of the mobile phone. So it's easy to be a pessimist if you just want, I don't know, a reward for being a smart person. And that just doesn't exist on the positive side. Though you need a positive vision for the future. And I don't know how to incentivize that or how to change the incentive. I'm not really convinced that that's ever been different. I wonder if there was a period of time where the average person was this optimistic. I guess people always point back to the 1950s in America. I didn't live then, so I don't know.
Yeah, and
We
people also
remember the
weren't.
positive stories, but I don't know how pervasive that really was.
If we had a frictionless way to dump our thoughts onto the internet or onto some ledger while we were sat on the toilet, just what would people's thoughts have been
Oh
at
my
that
God. I
time?
think about that in the context of the 60s. Like, you think things are crazy now on the internet. Can you imagine how crazy things would have been all throughout civil rights and shit like this? Like, it would have
Yeah.
been a different, we wouldn't have, I don't know that we would have made it. I don't know that we would have made it if we knew everything that everyone was thinking, which, to go back to our earlier conversation about being polite, that's the core of politeness, right? That's why polite exists, is because there is a social benefit to not saying everything that comes
Mm, yeah.
into your mind. And it's like you have to choose which ones need to be said, but probably not everything should. Not only does it not have to be said, it probably should not be said. There is a benefit socially to polite society, I think.
Decorum keeps the peace in many ways. But I think the reason that, at least for me, that I'm like kind of conflicted about the whole polite society thing is that I then go and see Sam, what's his face, that singer guy, come out dressed as a devil with nipple tassels on in like high heel leather boots, and I go, like it seems to me like any remotely acceptable line of decorum and behavior has been blasted through already, with a AK-47. Like, what are we doing here pretending that decorum still exists? Like, you shouldn't be bringing up that thing. And you go, well,
It doesn't exist, though. I think that you're right. It does not exist anymore. I'm saying it served probably a purpose, though. Like, we've lost it, and what are we going to become without it? I mean, certainly in politics, everything before Donald Trump, I would say it was pretty bad. Post Donald Trump, come on. I was
gloves are
looking
off.
at Kamala Harris giggling over nothing the other day on a YouTube video. It was really a bizarre video where she's not really saying anything and she keeps laughing awkwardly. And I thought, man, if this were 10 years ago, we would say, how we can't have someone this stupid in power. It's just crazy, let alone the senile Joe Biden. Of course, that's crazy. But let's talk about how dumb Kamala Harris is. That's an actual, like, sort of classically presenting idiot. And she is a heartbeat away from the presidency. Just a complete moron. It never would have happened. And she's sort of talking about the food that she's eating. And
I haven't seen this clip. I'm
she's
really
trying.
glad.
What I saw was an example of her trying to be relatable. And that is not in keeping with the image of the presidency that has endured for the last, since the founding fathers existed. Okay. Like, we need that person to be powerful and thoughtful and trustworthy, someone who we believe can run the country, right? Like, that all turned on its head in a world post Trump. Like, once you elect a reality television star to the presidency, anything fucking goes. Like,
Monarchy. That's what you need. Someone who has
lots
been
of return.
bestowed from God.
So you got to go all the way back.
Yes.
And that's maybe the really controversial thing that needs to be said. It's like, was George Washington the good guy or the bad guy? And I don't think America's ready for that conversation.
Wow. TikTok ban. What do you think is going to happen there? Or what would you like to see happen?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think that I think that, well, certainly we're looking at least a year of litigation. And in that year, who knows? Who knows what will happen. I'm in favor of it, but I'm in favor of much more aggressive action against China. I don't really, the spying thing is a whole complicated talk that we could talk about. And I believe it is a liability for the country to have China control one of our largest broadcast networks in the history of the country. But I am also just really thinking a lot about trade and the massive disparity in trade. We need reciprocity. If China is banning all of our social media companies, we should ban all of theirs. If China is banning anything that they're banning or any tariff they're levying, we should be doing the same thing. And in fact, we should be doing more of it, because what we learned in COVID is we need manufacturing. The failure of manufacturing at home is not just sad for us and for the middle class that no longer exists in this country. It is dangerous. It is a national security threat. So we need to have this somehow at home. And that that's a combination of that is going to require a lot of things that nobody wants to do. That's going to require looking at the labor laws. That's going to require looking at things like tariffs. Like this is going to be things that annoy the left, the right, the libertarians. We're just in a huge mess right now, and I am very much in favor of forcing divestiture of TikTok, but I'm in favor of forcing divestiture of almost every Chinese social media company or social piece of software that exists. Certainly every social media company, like everything, just down the line. And then China retaliates. They're like, oh, we're retaliating and we're banning one of your companies or whatever. It's like do people not real? There is no major American media company, the New York Times, the Washington Post, that can operate in China. There is no American social media company that can operate in China. Google cannot operate in China. You can just go look at all of the things that China has banned, American companies. The list is enormous, ongoing, never ending. It's just ridiculous to be playing it this way. You can say, oh, well, we're not like China. And it's like, no, we're not like China, but we do have to survive. And
But that's not necessarily a good thing, to not be prepared to use the tools that they do.
Well, certainly what they have that we don't have is a will to exist. Okay. And it's like freedom. Yes. Great. Love it. But you can't, it's like until the point at which you self-immolate and the only tools you have left to work with are controlled by a hostile foreign superpower, which is the path we're on. And you see this in soft power type things all the time. You see this with the way Disney has reshaped just due to the influence of the Chinese market. Okay. Disney starts to censor on all sorts of grounds of the NBA and things like this. That's just soft power. That's not even the hard power of they're going to play hardball with a corner on rare earth metals, a corner on manufacturing. We haven't even gotten to a place where they start wielding that against us. That can't happen. We need to bring it home, and we need to be a little bit more mercantilist about stuff, which I think is a dirty word still. I'm not sure how people think about that anymore, but I'm pretty much a mercantilist. So
do you know the story of DJI drones? Do you know why they're so dominant? So this is secondhand hearsay, so I may have got it wrong, but it's a great story. America was super concerned about individuals, citizens, being able to fly drones. So they shut down a ton of American drone manufacturers. Then they realized that the market for drones is actually quite high, and guess the only company that was still crushing it in the consumer space, DJI, which is a Chinese company, and now they are just light years ahead. Everything's cheaper, everything's better quality, it does all of the things that it needs you to do, and that's a Chinese company mapping fucking everything.
Yeah, I didn't realize the full extent of that story. You don't typically see, to our credit, you don't typically see China just completely take over an industry that was ours, because China doesn't innovate at all. I can't think of a technology that was invented in China. It's all just copy and pasting in a very great way. I mean, they're very tactically advantageous way for them. It's just see what America innovates, clone it, scale it. But long term, that's a problem, and it's a problem that is bigger than China, right? It's like you saw. I was just reading about a genetic engineering controversy. So in the mid 1970s, you had Cambridge, Massachusetts, ban the use of and the study of recombinant DNA, and at that point, the future of genetics is in the balance. All of the people working on it are there. And it was reversed in 77, but it had to be reversed or nothing was going to happen. And that is kind of what you're looking at in California, I think, to a certain extent, with which way these regulations on something like artificial intelligence will go. And there's enough that has been researched already that other people in different countries will use what we use and keep moving forward. They're not going to stop. I don't see anybody in China developing anything ever that hasn't existed before. But if we stop ourselves, they will keep moving forward with what we have started. And so that is a problem, especially when you're dealing with potentially X-risk type technology. So anything in biology and certainly artificial intelligence would count. You know, if you're building something that this is, I mean, you got to get an AI doomer on here. They have 1,000 different arguments they'll make. I'm not sold really on any of them, but I am sold on the idea that this is a high risk technology. We should proceed, and we should proceed sort of with caution.
Do you see Nick Bostrom's new book, Deep Utopia?
Have not seen the new book, but I have read
Superintelligence.
Yeah, I read Superintelligence way back.
Yeah, so Superintelligence was basically what happens if we get it wrong.
Yeah.
And Deep Utopia is what happens if we get it right. It's really interesting, to see this guy who's gone kind of full circle, and he's explaining, well, this is a hopeful view for the future. But even then, he kind of creates this taxonomy of 4 different types of utopias. And even within those, all of them have got tons of fucking problems. Like, it is the most like thready needle to try and weave through to make this work. And yeah, I mean, I understand why the AI X risk doomer conversation is compelling, because it's terrifying and seems kind of likely.
Yeah, but everything seems kind of likely. You can make an argument for the singularity. You can make an argument for the simulation hypothesis. These are things that are almost designed to capture smart people inside of a little maze where there are all of these likely things. But at the end of the day, on the simulation theory, for example, what value do you get in even talking about? It's like, you should just live your life. You should just do as many good things as you can in your life. And with AI, I sort of feel that way as well. I've never met anybody who has spoken to me in a convincing way on the big danger. It's always the smartest of them do percentages, and even those feel like, where are you running these calculations? Like, what are we really talking about? It's just a giant question mark. But all technology is a giant question mark. And so if you want to progress, you're going to have to take risk. There's a question of how much are we taking and at what scale. But I don't know, man. I think that it's a lot like the freedom conversation we were having a moment ago. You sort of want as much of it as you can without destroying yourself. That's the sweet spot. It's not a maximum in any direction. It's like, let's just not suffocate ourselves to death. And so while I am in favor of thinking about the X risk inherent of AI, right now I see no evidence to slow down. And once we see that evidence, it should be pretty obvious. The X risk AI people will be like, well, once it's obvious, it's too late. Okay, well, I don't. You're gonna have to give me a better reason. You have to like really paint that picture for me, and that has not happened yet. So,
what about the most important thing that's going to happen over the next month and a bit? Biden-Trump debate.
I didn't think it was going to happen at all. We'll see if it does. I'm still not convinced.
Oh, you still unsure that it's actually going to go ahead?
Well, if they allow for mic cutting, which is what the Biden camp wants, I don't know why Trump would accept that. If it does happen, it's going to be a bloodbath. Like, Trump will win for sure. Biden has not even appeared on a friendly interview for longer than 30 minutes or something. And could you imagine him sitting down for 2 hours or 3 hours in front of Rogan or something? It's not possible. I don't know how he's going to go head to head with Trump, who is one of the most successful short form, like, television warriors in the history of the medium. He's really good at it. The good news for Biden is if he somehow survives it, it'll be a huge boon to him, but he probably won't. And until now, but I guess I should say until now, saying nothing has only helped Trump. So I think Biden's just in a rough spot where he has sort of no choice.
Okay. When you're a declining stock, you need to do something to reverse it, even if that thing is quite high risk.
He's on a failure course right now.
Is that what your prediction would be if there's basically no change by the Democrats, that you're looking at Republican victory in November?
Yeah, I think it's like a smash victory. I think it's like a huge, huge victory. So they need to do something. I think a big part of it is immigration. A big part of it is inflation. I think those things are weirdly linked. The immigration is not causing the inflation. I think the immigration is being used to sort of like stem the inflation. Immigration, even if it's mass illegal immigration, has positive effects on the numbers in the economy that you point to say our economy is doing well. It's just like it has all of these other effects that for whatever reason economists don't seem to care about, like the dissolution of our fucking culture in America, and the simple law of supply and demand that affects more poor and middle class people than rich people with desk jobs. When you're talking about mass low skilled immigration, um, people are furious. People have always been furious, but also it's never even been this bad before. Think about 10 million illegal immigrants in your country of 330 million. That's what, 3%. That is an enormous population of people who broke a law to get here, and people are mad across demographics. So the big story, I think, of the next election is going to be the black vote, specifically the black male vote, which has never been Trumpier and has never been Republican. Trump was always
What's driving that?
immigration. I think it's entirely immigration. I think that, I mean, you look at Chicago, videos out of Chicago and the effects of illegal immigration in Chicago, and you look at those meetings, those community meetings where people are coming to yell. It's black people. It's all black people. It's black neighborhoods where this is happening. It's black people who are already struggling, lower class black people who are already struggling on work for whatever. You could say it's unfounded. You could say it's founded, but certainly the blame is being placed on illegal immigration, and no one is stupid enough to believe that that's not Biden's fault. So it's like this election will be a referendum on that more than anything. And then inflation, and Biden sucks at both. And so what is left? The wars. Who cares about them really? Not many people, other than like reflexively wish we weren't at them. But certainly Biden has gotten us into them, right? Like Ukraine happens on Biden's watch. Israel happens on Biden's watch. We're somehow really woven into both. I saw this crazy, it was funny, but darkly funny meme on Instagram. It was the Iron Dome stopping a bunch of rockets. So you saw these rockets coming up and hitting all these other rockets. And the meme just said, like, my tax dollar is paying for this, the Iron Dome. And then up here on the top, my tax dollar is somehow also paying for this. And that's like number 3. It'll be like, that's order number 3 of things that we care about. And then it's just the fun culture war shit, which,
the abortion debate. What about Roe?
I don't know. I don't have a sense of how much people really care about this. It seemed to matter in the last election. I think Americans are more divided on it than people like to believe, but is it more important than the immigration stuff and the inflation stuff to people? I don't think so. I guess we'll see. Yeah, I don't know about that one. What about you? What do you think?
That's a really tough one to work out as well. I don't think about it that much, but I think about it a good bit. And I think most people don't know their position very thoroughly on it. Like if you really, really quiz people hard, a sufficiently good argument can usually begin to yeah, well, you kind of sort of right on that thing a little bit. It's one of the few debates or one of the few discussions where every time, like I hear a Shapiro, right, do his thing and he breaks down life begins, it's not a bundle of cells, blah, blah, blah. And I go, fucking hell, that sounds pretty compelling. And then I hear someone who's like super pro-choice give their argument and I go, fucking hell, that's super compelling. I'm like, I don't know. I've just been like legitimately, like actually gaslit by both sides, and now I believe both at the same time. I don't fucking know.
Well, that's America has been like this on Roe v. Wade and abortion in general forever. It's never moved. It's always close to 50% on both sides. There's no other issue that I can think of like that in history. It's just always hotly divided, and so separate from the question of whether Roe v. Wade was a good law, and I think it was not, or a good ruling, and I think it was not. There's the question of what should be done, and that's more complicated. And what the real answer here is, you want something codified. You want to codify a law, and rather than judge on something in a stupid way that doesn't make any sense and everybody knows is not correct. Where the judicial branch essentially creates a law for you. You want our legislators to legislate and create something, but they can't agree. I think probably what makes the most sense is something closer to what I don't want to wade into an abortion debate. I'm pro-choice within reason. Like I have all sorts of caveats like everybody else. I think that I agree with you that most people don't fully know what they think about this. It just makes them uncomfortable and they don't want to have to think about it. But there are a handful of people who care about it a lot. In this election, do they Do they punish Trump for it? Can they punish Trump for it? I don't know. I know that I know a lot more people who talk about immigration. I see a lot more people talking. I don't see people talking uh, about Roe v. Wade really
I
anymore.
suppose the timing of it, you just recency bias and people's attention span is so short that right now,
I mean, what would they have to do?
immigration.
Biden would have to make a promise for some sort of law to be codified. And if he did that, he would lose a lot of people and gain some people, right? Because wherever he drew the line of where abortion would not be allowed, right? No one wants an abortion a day before birth, right? You can just start there. So there are some who do, some very radical people who want that and will never let go of it. And those people are the ones who run the organizations that are pro-choice. The average American doesn't. The average left-wing person doesn't. The average pro-abortion person doesn't. But the people who run shit do. So Biden has to draw a line somewhere if he's going to float legislation. And once he does that, he gives a huge attack space for Trump to come in and be like, this man wants to kill babies. And so it's like no one's really incentivized to propose a law in the middle of an election that is already hard to win, especially not a Democrat. So it's going to be hard. It'll be hard for both of them. But like, you can either punish Trump for Roe v. Wade. That's one thing, but there's not a really clear alternative. There's not like, if I vote for this person, I'm going to get what I want.
It's just how viscerally people are affected by this as well. You know, abortion by definition is an individual impact, whereas something like economy, inflation, immigration, those things are much more scattergun, and they're felt by people en masse. There's waves of it that occur, like literally, right? There's waves of it that occur. And I think that galvanizes people in a different sort of way. But that debate, my God. Here's one thing that I have noticed, though. Trump is way less in the news. Like, I just don't see, you think about the buildup to the last two elections, and it was everywhere. And I'm like, where the fuck is he? Because he's not on Twitter? Like, what's going on? I just don't see
a huge
stuff.
Part of it. Part of it was there was no primary because he didn't have to have a primary because he was going to win. So he stayed out of it. And then part of it is he's not on Twitter, and there are less people on, I mean, no one's really on his network, and there are media people are still on Twitter. So if he was on Twitter, media people would still at least see what he's tweeting. He would feel more sort of present in their brains. They would at least be more anxious about it and be writing more about it. And then part of it is Biden's just not like, I think Democrats are really embarrassed of him. So while people really hate Trump on the left, the average person on the left is not excited about Biden. They're like, this feels a little bit criminal that we're trying to float someone who's totally senile.
What do you think that people on the right think an equivalent side? They probably really don't like Biden, but do they really like Trump?
There are people who love Trump in a way that no president has been loved in our lifetime. Like, and it's a non-trivial fraction of the right. People who fucking love him, who would do anything for him. And that's not a majority of the right. That's a good, huge chunk of a base that really, really, really devoutly loves him. And then you have a lot of people who are fine with him. And then you have a lot of people who didn't vote for him, but might now because they have a bunch of different reasons. Some are talking about the wars. Some are talking about the economy. Some are talking about immigration. You had all sorts of weird own goals on the left. So the way that Warren went after cryptocurrency, for example, there are a lot of people with exposure to cryptocurrency who are like, who is this bitch coming after my Bitcoin? And why does she think that she's able to do that? That's insane. There are all sorts of tax gains proposals and wealth tax proposals, which hit the rich, who fuel a lot of the money behind these different grassroots campaigns. You also have 4 years of incompetency from Biden, I think, on a range of things, but specifically, I think foreign policy has been pretty bad. If you're voting for a guy who you think is going to make things calm and return us to norms, and then he tries to put the frontrunner president in prison and is now fighting 2 wars abroad, like, that is not what you asked for. And it's like, even if he wasn't senile, it would be a hard sell at this point, I think. But he's all of those things and he's senile. So it's they're like separate from the left who's just tolerating him. I think a lot of people on the right are like a lot of people in the middle, I think, are thinking Well, Trump's better than that. And we know what Trump is. No matter what people say about Trump being fascist dictator and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we've had 4 years of Trump. So we know roughly what that feels like, just like we've had 4 years of Biden. This is the first election like that we've ever had, where we actually know exactly what a presidency feels in both directions. So that by we, I don't mean America, I mean we alive right now, have never experienced this before. So you can't really say, there's no fear of the uncertainty here. There might be fear, but it's not of the uncertainty, which fuels, I think, a lot of what happens in most elections.
Dude, it's a wild few months coming up. Time to make hay, as the independent media companies say. Mike Solana, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, I love your stuff. Pirate Wires, I listen to all of the podcasts. I read the morning takes. I read everything else. Where should people go if they want to keep up to date with the things you do?
Go to Pirate Wires and subscribe to the Daily. Hit the newsletter button, subscribe to the Daily, and subscribe to Pirate Wires for my essays. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed that episode, you will love a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last couple of months, and it's available right here. Go on. Give them a watch.